Hey there, welcome to the Inside Running Podcast weekend interview. We got a good one for your Sunday long run this week. We're going back to 2019. This is on episode number 74 and 75. Crokes interviewed world cross country champion, Australian, the only Australian to do it, Benita Willis back then. So we're re-releasing this interview. It's an amazing listen. Benita's always been very generous with her time, and she shares some amazing stories with Crokes in this chat. So we really do hope you enjoy this. There's obviously not much more to say about Benita, probably the greatest Australian female distance runner of all time with her CV, and of course that world cross country championship win obviously makes that case pretty easy to argue. Massive thank you to our supporters on Patreon. You can do that at patreon.com/Inside Running Podcast for as little as $5 a month. So if these shows bring you value, the weekly show, Shoe Geeks, that kind of stuff that we bring out throughout the month, that would be greatly appreciated for your support. Also a good time to hit up some bonus content if that's what you're after. We had a monthly episode drop with Chris So and Toby during the week, and Road to Gold Coast also came out yesterday. And we were really impressed with the chemistry that panel put together. First up, it sometimes takes a few episodes to hit that, but they were on fire early. So that's Reese Edwards, who we're all familiar with. Carla Trueck, who's based in Ballarat. A lot of people don't know a lot about Carla, but yeah, some amazing responses hearing her on the mic for the first time. And Sam Hopper, who is one of the big dogs at ASICS. So get to hear about his running, but also what his job kind of entails as well. Anyway, enough about that. Enjoy this chat with Benita Willis and Bradley Croker back from 2019 April. Cheers, guys.
All right, so today's guest is a four-time Olympian, multiple Australian record holder, and the only Australian to have ever won World Cross Country. Benita Willis, welcome to Inside Running.
Thanks. Thanks. It's awesome to be on the podcast.
Yeah, no, we're super stoked to have you. Like, you've had obviously an amazing career, and it must have brought back some memories following the World Cross last weekend.
Yeah, for sure. And we did really well, and it's just such a hard competition. But certainly the course, I think, was quite similar to the course that I won the World Cross Country on in Brussels like 15 years ago.
Yeah.
So I think those hard courses really test the athletes, and especially with those really big hills.
Yeah.
They just did a fantastic job organising that one over there. And I think, I just think it's one of those kind of courses that as a cross-country athlete and, middle long distance runner, like you want to go to a World Cross with a course that's tough, and that certainly was really hard race.
Yeah, it must have been encouraging to see some of the good results, especially amongst the juniors. I think both the male and female, it was sort of our best result for 10 years.
Yeah, and I think it's hard because as a junior, I think it's really important to do a lot of different things, but as you get past like the years like 18, 19, 20, you can kind of really start specializing. And I think those juniors, it's a sign, and it's good experience for them as well to go to the World Cross Country and do so well.
Yeah.
But it's really a stepping stone onto kind of the next level of making teams for track races as well. But they just did really well, and it was really interesting because some of those younger athletes that are just into seniors, like Matt Ramsden, some guys like that, like Brett Robinson as well, they're quite young still, but they, especially Matt, but they're doing well transitioning into the seniors, and so I think that's a really hard. And I've done a few talks recently about kind of juniors transitioning into seniors, and it's a really hard part of any athlete's career is that next step. So I'll be following those juniors, and just really excited to see how they go in the next 5 years.
Well, we'll obviously talk about your 2004 World Cross Country result, but maybe let's take it back to how how you got into the sport in the first place, because I know that you were an excellent hockey player as well. So how was sport for you growing up?
Yeah, I think growing up, sport was something that we just did every afternoon after school. I had two brothers and a sister. And my sister Caitlin actually went on to make the world champs twice, and get the gold medal in the 4x4 relay at the 2006 Com Games. And but we were just really competitive. So, like, backyard sport, you just keep going until mum would be yelling at dinner time or, like, too dark to see the ball anymore. And I think we were very much into team sports. I grew up in North Queensland, right on the beach in a coastal suburb of Mackay. And I think we just loved it. And even if it was raining or, like, didn't really matter, like, we were always outside doing stuff. And I think that love for sport is something that probably, like, just helped with my resilience and everything else that I did, as I was older. But it was kind of like we just did it as kids. Like, it's not like we didn't kind of do it thinking we wanted to be like sports people when we were older. We just kind of, that's just a lifestyle that we all had.
Yeah. Were your parents quite athletic as well?
Yeah, they were, but they weren't like Olympians or, my dad was real good at rugby league, and he used to run on the beach every day, just go running. He didn't really compete as such, but just loved running. And mum was really good at, like, jumping, like long jump. Like, she was quite fast, really good at tennis. She was really good at heaps of bat ball sports. But neither of them, like, how so many athletes, they kind of say, oh, my parents were in the Olympics for this or that. But that wasn't the case with my parents, but they were very sporty for sure.
And I read somewhere that you were into shooting and motorbike riding as well. Is that right? No?
Well, just at my cousin's farms, but I wouldn't say that I do it at home. But yeah, my mum was from Apple Farms in Stanthorpe, which is kind of right on the Queensland-New South Wales border. So we used to do that stuff when we went there, but only be like once a year. So yeah, I don't know. I think I just loved just going out to farms and stuff. So I would do that, but not a lot in Mackay.
And so where was your first sort of introduction to running?
Well, I mean, so when I was 10, so when I was in year 5, I like didn't really train much, but I made the state title. So I was in the North Queensland team for 800, and I came second at the state champs. And then like nationals was going to be in Melbourne, and Mum was like, "Oh yeah, well you should go just in case you never make it again." So I think from when I was quite young, I was good, but it wasn't something that I enjoyed as much as hockey and team sports. So I probably started running on the beach about that age, like with my dad, but I didn't do any organised training as such. So kind of I didn't even wear shoes like to race. Like I used to wear just bare feet and tape my big toe until I was like in year 9, I think, on those red tracks. So I was pretty rough, I think, as a kid, but it wasn't like, that's just what we did. But I liked the competition of running, but I didn't see the point in like racing as hard as you can from the start. I just I just used to run to try to win races, not time trial them, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. And so then all through high school you're pretty much juggling like your school running with, I guess, representative hockey as well?
Yeah, for sure. And like I was in Australian rep teams for hockey throughout high school, and I think at one stage the World Juniors in 1996, when I was in year 12, they clashed with I was in an Australian team for hockey that toured South Africa, and they both clashed, and I kind of had to choose which one I wanted to do, and I chose hockey. So throughout high school, especially when I was in year 9, 10, 11 and 12, I was away a lot for hockey, especially because kind of hockey trips, you're away for 2 weeks, whereas like athletics, you're not as away for quite as long. But I did go through a stage in high school where I didn't really like running, like especially year 8 and 9. I didn't really kind of I competed a bit, but I didn't go away for any trips, and I just didn't enjoy it. So I did a lot more hockey, and I think that's really important for kids like that are quite talented, and I was really talented. Like it's really important that if you don't really like it, you shouldn't be putting pressure on those sort of sports and doing the team stuff. And then maybe you can always come back to it if you want to. Yeah,
that's a good point. Actually, I watched some documentary on a guy that's written a book about people that specialise too early and the downfalls. It's a good point you make. So, when did you first have a coach for running?
Well, I mean, like when I made a few of these Queensland teams when I was in high school, I used to train with this guy called Marty Roberts that trained, that he coached Kathy Freeman a bit, just on the beach near my house in Bucasia. And then my high school PE teacher was a guy called John Clancy, who's now head of PE at Brisbane Boys Grammar School in Brisbane here. And I really just trained with him. So he was a rugby league player. And so I used to train with all these like, just state high school rugby league guys. And John was really good. Like we just trained 3 times a week and did things like 300 reps or stuff that was like not very much volume. Like I think my long run was like, I think 20 minutes was a long run. Like I just, so I was definitely, my weekly volume of training wouldn't have been much. I didn't keep a training diary or anything, but I just trained a bit like for the 3 months leading into the all school stuff at the end of the year. So I didn't do running. I didn't do training at the start of the year because that was hockey season. I never did cross country because that all clashed as well with hockey. So, yeah.
But I guess that with all the hockey, like you would have been, you'd run a fair few kilometres a game in hockey. So like that would keep you pretty fit anyway, even though you weren't doing so much structured athletics training.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. And I was in high school, I was in the QAS for hockey. So I'd come to Brisbane a bit and, I was training. I was in quite a few different hockey teams. So I was probably doing some kind of training every day. And I think it's that, like I was probably really fit and I felt like I trained less than I did, but I was definitely doing some kind of training every day, but it wasn't really just running stuff. It was a mix of both. Yeah.
And so at what point did you then change the focus from hockey to running?
Well, after year 12, while I was in year 12, Dick Telford, who at the time was a physiologist at the AIS in Canberra, and he was just moving into the coaching section for track and field, he offered me a scholarship to the AIS and on the basis of talent, because I'd won like national titles before, but I didn't have any national records or anything like that. Like my times weren't very good, but I think he saw potential in me as an athlete and as a runner. And so I thought, I may as well go there because I can do uni full time at University of Canberra and just train a bit and see how I go. Because like I was going to move away from home anyway for uni. I was going to move down to the Gold Coast actually for uni. So I just put in my application to go to University of Canberra and I thought I'll just try it out. And I think in 1997 was my first year at AIS and I still played A-grade hockey for university and we actually won the premiership that year. But that was the first year that I kind of trained a lot more for hockey, for running. Yeah. And I remember 20-minute warm-ups, like Dick's group used to do 20-minute warm-ups and I was like stuffed after the warm-up. So it was a bit of a shock to me for the first 6 months of being there. But I loved the group training. Like that's something I never really did much when I was at school.
Yeah. And the AIS were happy for you to continue playing hockey while you're there on a running scholarship?
Yeah, so they were really good because like Carol Grant was in charge of all the athletes for track and field and she was fantastic and they really let me it was really hard for me. I was quite shy being away from home. It also, I was only still 17 the first year I was there. I didn't turn 18 till the middle of that year and they let me do uni full time. I even lived at University of Canberra, not the AIS, just because I kind of wanted to meet more people at uni than just like no athletes. And so my friends were quite a wide base of different people. But yeah, they were happy for me to play hockey. Like they were really good. And I think it was just more the transition. I didn't want to just be like just full-time running, if you know what I mean, or just training for running. And I think it was too hard for me to accept that I could be quite good. I was kind of always thinking, it's just a good way to do uni and I'll just see how good I get at running. But I didn't actually expect to get as good as I got.
Yeah, because you moved down in 97 and then you obviously made the 2000 Olympics. But in the meantime, so changing the focus from hockey to running, you went to World Juniors and finished, was it 7th in the 1500?
Yeah, 7th, yeah. So I went to World Juniors in 98 and that was the first time I'd represented Australia at anything for track and field. And yeah, it was awesome. Like, I think I came 7th in my heat, so I just made the final because I think I was in a fast heat, and then I came 7th in the final, and I did PBs in both races. And I remember that was a really, I really quite liked that experience. Like it was full on, but I loved the competition of racing really hard people, really hard competition. And I think, like I got glandular fever. I got my first injury all in the first year I was at the AIS. So that was all kind of around that time, before or after that time. So I had a lot of things going on, but it was a cool experience and something that I kind of thought, I want to kind of keep doing this and see if I can get better.
Yeah.
Because I think it's a big thing if you can do a PB in a final of a big race. Obviously, you don't do that as you get older because your PBs are so good. But when you're younger, I think if you can perform as well as you can, as fast as you ever have, I think it's a good sign of how well you can compete under pressure.
Yeah.
And
was that the turning point for you where you thought that the Olympics were a real possibility?
No, because I still felt like I was a long way off. I think I only ran about 4:18 there, and the qualifying time I think was 4:08 maybe for the A qualifier for the 1500. But it was a couple of years, so it was 1999 going into 2000, and I think I'd just been training really well, and I ran really well at Zatopek in the 1500, I think. Or this might have been the 3K in 98 or 99. And then I was kind of like, I was just getting better and better. And I remember like I had a friend that was an 800 runner, and she paced me in a 1500 at the start of 2000 just to try to get the Olympic qualifier. And I still remember that these days when it was televised and the commentators were kind of saying, I can't believe Benita's going out at this pace, because no one else went with the pace except me and the pacemaker. And I ended up running the A qualifier in that race. And then I was kind of like, this is awesome. Like, but I mean, having said that, I didn't end up making the team for the 15 because I came fourth at the trials, because we had a lot of really good girls in the 15 going into Sydney. And but then I just thought I'll just give the 5K a go, and I won that trial for Sydney Olympics. So it's kind of, it's kind of like I think the turning point was probably that 99, 2000, like going through that end of that year and then thinking how much I was improving. Yeah.
And who were your main training partners down at the AIS?
Oh, so it was Marty Dent, Mark Thompson, Clint McAvicious, Simon Hurt, Wayne Bristow, Paul Fenn. There was a lot of guys. Sophie Scamps. There was Deb Savage. Heaps of people. It was a really good group, and I think like a lot of guys, young guys from the Central Coast.
Yeah.
And they'd kind of moved there on part scholarship. Some of the guys had moved there not even on any sort of scholarship, but just wanting to get better. And I'm still really good mates with a few of them. And Marty Dent's gone on to almost made the Sydney Olympics, but then he's gone on to doing brilliant things like a little bit later. And he's a great friend of mine. And like just kind of one of those stories where just missing an Olympic selection in 2000 and then coming back years later to make London Olympics. So it's his story's pretty awesome.
Yeah. And where are we? So who do you say were your sort of biggest influences early on in your career?
I think just learning the structure. Like I think going to the AIS helped me like learn the structure of how to train, and that like people get massage and just things like that. I think Dick Telford was really good because he came from the physiology side. So I was always quite academic at school. And so I think it was really good being in that environment, because I was at uni full time, and I like didn't have, like I was really busy. But I think it was really good to like understand like how training and stuff like that fits in with like racing and kind of, I think, so he was really good. I think Carol Grant was really good. She went on to work for Athletics Australia, but she was really good because I did get homesick a lot the first year I was in Canberra. Like I'd go home every holidays, and I found the weather really cold too.
Yeah.
So you probably understand that. But it was just one of those things where I kind of considered moving back to Queensland after the first year because I got a stress fracture, and I was like, if this is what running's going to do to me, I don't really want to do it. So, but it just happens. It happens to everyone, obviously. But I think when you're young, you just So I think Craig Purdon was awesome too. He was a physio there, and he really helped with a lot of things. And just the AOS was a really good experience for me, for sure. All the people there.
the thing that comes across from, what we've been chatting so far, it seems like you always had really good balance. You never sort of got caught up in putting your eggs in one basket. As you said, you had uni going on and you had a bit of hockey, and, you never had that pure focus on one area, which probably meant that you're a bit more holistic and generally happy with things.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I think that's really important, especially in those like developmental years where you're probably not, like, I wasn't traveling away much. Like, I did the Telstra A series, that what it was called back then. And I did like local races, but I didn't really ever go overseas except for like World Juniors and World Unis in 99. So I think it's really important because you're not going to be like running diamond leagues and stuff when you're 18 or 19. And so you can't kind of just expect to be going over to Europe as soon as you finish high school. Like, you can't get in that frame of mind. And I think I didn't even know that was a thing. I never heard of a Golden League until, probably a few months before I ever did one. And so I think kind of I was probably a bit ignorant, or not ignorant, but I just didn't know. I didn't know what athletes did. I think just having that uni lifestyle and having that balance and having friends that weren't just athletes as well helped. But I probably did take on too much in the first few years I was at the AIS because I did get injured. I did get glandular fever. So I had a few things going on. But I think I stopped playing hockey after that year, after 97. So 98 was the first year I didn't play hockey. But I think that helped my running improve even more as well.
It sounds like once the hockey stopped and you started like sort of full-time running, or that full running structure, that's when, World Juniors came around, and then obviously getting the A standard for the Olympics. Yeah,
for sure.
And experience, so memories of 2000 Olympics. I know it's a while ago, but
yeah. I think it was just one of those experiences. Like, I still remember the opening ceremony and the noise in the stadium when we walked in, like, just crazy. And Kathy Freeman was in our block in the village, like in our little. We had these little dementable kind of blocks where we all lived, and there was like 12 people in mine. And we saw her when we caught the bus to the stadium, and then we just didn't see her once we got there. And I remember Tams and Lewis just saying, "Oh, wonder where Kathy is." And then the next minute she's lighting the flame. And I still remember, like, no one knew that she was going to do it, but it was like those kind of experiences. And like when I was running in my heat, like I almost made the final, but I did a PB in my heat. But I went to the front and led for probably 5 laps of the 5K, and the noise was so loud. Like, that's the loudest stadium I've ever run in. Even louder, I think, than the MCG at Com Games in 06. And it was one of those experiences where it was awesome. But then when it's over, it was kind of like, you kind of think, I still didn't think I was quite good enough. I still wanted to be better, even though I ran really well there. I still wanted to be better, which I think is a good sign. But at the time, I was really frustrated because I was kind of like, I want to make the final and I wanted to run faster, but you got to think about how you progress, and you can't skip steps. You got to do everything kind of in stages. So I think I enjoyed it. It was a good experience for me, but I kind of wanted to be better after it finished, for sure.
Sound like every distance runner I know. It doesn't matter how big your PB is. You run it and you're like, oh, I want more. Which as you said is a good thing, because as soon as you have the mentality of, I don't think I can run any faster than that, there's probably not much point continuing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you've got to want to do it. And that's what I've seen with a lot of juniors that probably train a bit too hard. They're kind of years of training hard and mentally being really focused. They've got so many years of that in them when they're in school that when they actually get to ages where they should be peaking, they don't want to do it anymore. And it's that mental thing of, you want to train hard, you want to compete as well as you can, like you're hungry for more. And once you don't have that, like, you can't ever be as good as you can be, and there's no point in doing it because it's full on, and it's kind of like it's every day. You can't just relax for a week, and you got to be really diligent about so many things.
Yeah. And so after Sydney, as you said, before Sydney, you never really travelled much for Diamond Leagues, so where was the turning point where you became, I would say, like full-time athlete, travelling the world, living basically being full-time on the circuit? I'd say 2001, I went to the World Indoors and the World Cross. So that was my first time at World Indoors, first time on an indoor track, and first time at the World Cross Country. And I remember
World Indoors was in Lisbon in Portugal, and we only took like 6 people in our team, and I came 6th in the final and ran 8:42, which was a huge PB and a national record. And I remember when I finished that race, that was when I thought I could be like world class, like I could be really good here, because I beat a lot of really good girls, but the girls in front of, like, it was it was a kind of race where I didn't expect to make the final, and then once I made the final, I ran a lot better in the final than I thought I would. And then I ended up going to World Cross Country the next week in Ostend in Belgium, and I came 6th at World Cross Country, and I was like, and that was when Paula Radcliffe won. And it was kind of one of those times where you're running with these people that you've heard of before, but you just don't ever kind of think that you'll ever be remotely as good. And obviously I'm not as good as Paula, but when you see those sort of people and some of these Africans that win the Olympics, and you're racing them and you're not that far behind them, it's pretty awesome.
Yeah. And was Dick still coaching you at that point?
Yeah, so Dick was coaching me, but I was getting managed by Nick Bordeaux. And then I think later in 2002, Nick started coaching me around the time of just after Com Games. So I was in the 5K and 1500 at Manchester Com Games, and I fell over in one of the races, but I didn't go. I kind of didn't really improve as much as I wanted to in those kind of years, and I ended up deciding to join Melbourne Track Club and started training with them. And like, I had a good setup overseas. I remember I lived in a house that had like 13 other people, and kind of started. So probably 2002, I probably started doing a lot more races on like the circuit, like Golden Leagues that they called then, and Grand Prix ones. And I think, I started living a lot more in the UK, obviously going to a few training camps in America and Switzerland, but living a lot more in the UK from about 2002. And then, kind of by 2004, I'd already broken a lot of Australian records and won the World Cross. So I'd say my career really kicked on in those few years. And I think a lot of my success was probably driven by races that didn't quite, like 2003 World Cross, I thought I was going to get a medal. I thought I was going to come 3rd. And then I remember these 2 shadows either side of me, like I was in Switzerland, quite a hot day, and I went from 3rd to 5th in a flash, and it was right near the finish too. And I was so annoyed about that race that I think it helped all my results that year. Like I broke the Australian record for 10K, I ran 30:37 in 2003. I got a bronze medal at the World Half Marathon that year, first half marathon. And like I think a lot of my results were driven by performances that weren't that good, because I like to be the underdog, and I wanted to kind of prove like that I can be better and prove people wrong kind of thing. And I think that's, so really after that Manchester Com Games, I was a bit injured that year too, I think at the start of the year in 2002, but I think the next few years after that, my career really kicked on.
Yeah. A question about the cross country. So like to finish 6th in your first ever cross country, a world cross, and then to obviously win in 2004. Now, like I always see cross country as being like a really strong runner's sort of, you got to be strong to be a good cross country runner. But you coming from I guess, typically sort of low mileage, not typically sort of strength-based training. What do you think made you such a good cross-country runner?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think I'm really good at running on uneven ground, and I was always really good at hills. And I think just given and I used to always start fast. Every race I did, I was always kind of in the first few. And I think that strength, I was probably like, I was good at track, but I would say that my strengths are like cross countries, hills, road races that have got a lot of turns in them. Like I was really good at races that are stop start, or kind of, which I don't know where I got that from. Like maybe it's a bit of the hockey as well, because it's kind of breaking your rhythm. And I was really good at I've got the Australian 10K record on the track, but I only did one really good 10K on the track, and the rest were, a couple of them were low 31s, but the rest were not very good. So I feel like, but I was always really good at cross country, and I think it was just that breaking rhythm, that strength, and I was very muscular too. Well, quite muscular compared to a lot of other distance runners. So I think that helped. But I don't know.
And probably just where you grew up as well, running on the beach and just not, sort of just being in the outdoors a bit more, maybe just general strength.
Yeah, I think so. General strength. And also I hated times. I hated lap times. I hated anything to do with time. And I think with cross country, it's about the competition. It's not about like how fast you can run or because every course is different. So you can't even compare results on different courses. But I think I just love the competition and like and the tactical kind of sense of like in the World Cross when I made the move in the last lap up that big hill and got a gap. It was kind of like I was thinking about doing that, in the first few laps, and you kind of have to plan a lot in cross country too, and be smart. And I was always kind of one of those people that I like to think a lot in races, but I hated, like if someone was calling out lap splits when I was running a 10K on the track or 5K on the track, I didn't even listen to them because it wasn't something that I kind of like. I still don't really care about Garmin's or anything. I don't log like training in like computer programs or like I was probably so I think that's another thing why I loved cross country as well.
Yeah. And how did a typical training week look for you sort of in those 2003, 2004 and how was it different from what you were doing with Dick?
Yeah, I think probably running about 160 Ks a week. And we do like kind of track sessions on Tuesday, maybe hills or hills on Thursday, tempo run Saturday, and the hills could be like 6 times 3 minute hills, jogging down. Track session could be, something like 6 to 8 times a K, or track was always different every week. And then tempo runs were kind of, anywhere up to about 30 minutes of volume at various heart rates. And I think it was the only thing that was a bit different, I think, was that I was doing a bit longer tempo runs maybe, and I probably was a bit fitter. Then maybe I was probably doing a bit more faster stuff. But then I was a younger athlete when I was getting coached by Dick as well. So I think it's probably the progression of as I was getting a bit older too. But I think I had a lot more confidence, when in those years when I was in Nick's group, and I think that really showed with my racing because I was kind of a lot of the time I probably didn't back myself as much as I should, and I think that's a huge part of the sport. But sometimes you get that confidence with what you can do in training, what you're doing in races, and then kind of taking risks in races too. And I think that's something that I really kind of had to develop as I got a bit older, and probably was a big part of my success rather than just having the fitness. So I think those little things helped me a lot in those kind of years between 2002 and 2000 rest of my career really, yeah.
And long runs by that stage, I'm guessing were longer than 20 minutes. They used to be.
So I'd say long runs were anything between about 25, 30K. Usually pretty easy, although if we were at training camps, we'd often go a bit harder on the long runs. But I mean, like there were training camps that I went on that I probably went a bit too hard on the easy days, and I got injured or I got a bit tired, or like I was still not very good at listening to my body and just kind of probably training a bit too hard sometimes to what I could manage. And usually you can notice that in races if you race straight off altitude. And I remember running a track race in Lausanne in Switzerland off a really hard altitude training camp in St. Moritz, and I ran crap, but then like 2 weeks later I ran really well. So you just kind of sometimes you're just a little bit tired, so you kind of have to adjust everything you're doing. And but I think that was the hardest part for me, which is most distance runners, is taking the rest and like kind of having confidence in the training that you've done. If you are a bit tired or a bit like sort of on the border of overtraining, to kind of back off a bit and before running really well. Like it's still there, but you can't push it and force it if it's not coming out. Yeah.
All right, well, let's get to this sort of 2003, 2004. So as you said, you broke the Australian 10K record at the Paris World Champs in 2003. I was actually in the stands that night. I was over there with the Sydney Uni crew every night. And then you obviously finished third at the World Half Champs. So going into 2004 World Cross, what were your expectations? Were you in the race to win? Like was that your mentality?
I guess I wasn't thinking that I was going to win, but I knew that I had a chance of a medal. And I raced and like given those results in 2003, like running 30:37, and then I think I ran 14:54 just before that, and I think 14:47 for 5K national record the year before. But going into World Cross in '04, I knew I was like fast, and I come off like getting a medal at the World Half was huge for me confidence wise, because it was kind of like my first medal at a big meet, and something that I just kind of didn't ever think I would do. And I came from behind in that race, and I think I overtook a few Russians with like 100 to go. And it was in Portugal. It was a hard, really hard course, hot course with like 112 turns. And I thought I ran like 69 something. But it was one of those races where like that was huge. And then I raced Dorada Tulu, who won Sydney Olympics in the 10K. I raced her at a cross-country meet in Japan just before World Cross, and I beat her. And I think she was kind of like saying she was glad that, because I think she was doing the 4K in Brussels and I was doing the 8K, and she warmed down with me, and she was kind of saying she was glad that she didn't have to race me at World Cross. And like to have, someone that's like this massive idol, like kind of very, very well-known distance runner saying that, I was kind of like thinking, well, I must be in good shape if she's saying that too.
Yeah.
But going into the race, like I just had to give myself a chance in that last lap. And the year before, I'd lost a bit of contact in the kind of third quarter. And that's where I have to really focus to not lose contact in the laps between 4 and 6K. And so I think my plan was just to like make sure I was there for the first 6K and not lose. And I did almost lose contact with the group between 4 and 6K. And they kind of surged a bit. But in the last lap, I knew it was a massive hill at the start of each lap. And I knew that the Africans I was running with, a couple of Ethiopians and a few Kenyans, and I knew that they were tiring. In that third lap, they were tiring a bit up that hill. They're very good at the downhill and along the flat. So I thought in the last lap, that'd be where I make my move. And Nick had actually given me a bit of a like an analogy to think about. And he was kind of like saying, when you make that move, you got to gap the rest of the field, and it's like you're holding on to these monkey bars that are as high as like a 20-story building, and you just got to hold on until someone like slides a mattress on the ground. That's when you cross the line, and you can let go and you won't die, kind of thing. I can't remember if that's exactly how he said it, but it was kind of like if you make the move, you've got to have the gap. You can't just make a move and then they just sit on you. And he's always said that to athletes, and a lot of coaches say that. And kind of I went hard there up that lap, up that hill, and I got a gap, and I was just freaking out because like you just didn't know where they were, because it was so quite loud and it was windy and it was raining a bit, and you just can't tell where people are. And so I was just kind of going as hard as I could, but like I was in great shape. It was a good course for me. I knew I'd be up there with a chance, but I let the process take care of itself more than just saying. And I never said to any media that I was going to win. I just said that I was in really good shape, and I was going to be up there, but I couldn't. It was hard. It's hard to say that. But then once I did it, I think it was pretty, like, it's the hardest race I ever ran. And how some PBs you run, they're easy races, but this was hard, so hard. But it was so awesome. And I think, that last 100 though, like I just didn't know where anyone was, but I ended up winning by a fair margin. But it was one of those races where you're kind of hoping that no one comes past, but you're just going as hard as you can. And that's the same with World Cross for anyone that ever does World Cross. You just don't want to lose any places in that last bit.
Yeah, that was going to be one of my questions, was at what was it one of those days where you just felt absolutely on and it was cruisy and you knew 3/4 of the way through the race that you were going to win it, or it was one where you really had to dig to go to the well? And at what point were you like in sort of severe pain? Like, was it the last quarter of the race? Yeah,
well, like I felt pretty good at the start, and then probably in the middle stages, I was feeling like I was going to get dropped. And like there was like 5 girls together at halfway, or maybe even a bit more. But I was kind of at the back of the pack by about 6K, probably by about 5K, so with 3K to go. And I was almost getting dropped. And I think at that stage I was really sprinting to, because, anyone that's done World Cross, it's like you're kind of running as hard as you can the whole way. And I kind of, I felt like I had to maintain contact to have any chance in the last lap of getting a medal. And I think So probably from about 5K, it was hard, but then it was really hard with about a K and a half to go. So 6.5K to 8K was really hard. And also, like, you don't want to look around to see where they are, because then they think, if they see you doing that, like, often they think that you're stuffed. But I was so hammered that, but I just didn't want to kind of, and I couldn't tell where they were. It was a sort of course that you can't see where everyone is, but you can just always hear people yelling and screaming. But I think they were probably yelling at me, a lot of people that didn't know me, but it was probably quite an unusual sight to see someone from Australia winning. So maybe that was why as well. But I was freaking out. Like, I was hurting so much, but just freaking out that I didn't want anything to happen like what happened the year before, when a couple of girls came past right at the end. And this time you wouldn't know, because it was so loud, but you couldn't see shadows. Like, you couldn't see anything because it was so cold and wet and stuff. So it was the sort of day where you just had to kind of go, and you have to run through the line at World Cross, because, you know, you can lose 10 places like in the blink of an eye if you don't kind of run through the line. So yeah, but it was pretty amazing. And still, I probably didn't appreciate how big that was for a long time, because it was an Olympic year. I just kind of, I knew it was a big thing to win, but I was kind of already almost straight away focused on Athens, that I probably didn't like enjoy it as much as I should have. And I always say that to younger runners now, you know, young elite athletes that are young in their career, like, you've got to celebrate those kind of big performances and really, like, I kind of probably didn't recognize how well I'd done. Like, you're kind of already thinking, I've got to go on to the next thing before, realizing what you've just done.
So true. And before we get to Athens, so by 2004, you're obviously a world-class athlete already, but did winning World Cross open up any extra doors for you in terms of increased appearance fees, extra sponsors? Did your life as an athlete change after that?
Yeah, like, it definitely, I got, you know, the contracts, I was on a Nike contract, but it was a lot better after I won that. And I was getting more appearance money because people wanted me in their races, because they wanted, you know, someone from Australia that had won a world title. Like, having some kind of title was a big thing to race organisers and promoters. But also I was happy to do a lot of stuff for the races and the events, and I think they liked that as well. But it definitely did. But I think the added pressure, like, I kind of raced better when I was the underdog, not really someone that everyone was trying to beat. And I think I found it really hard after World Cross, after I won that race, going into races and racing people that are like, I just want to beat Benita, like, which is fine, and that's what everyone's like. But I hated that pressure, and I probably didn't run quite as well in a lot of races after that, in the year and a half after I won that race, because of that. And so I probably, like, mentally, that was a hard thing. Like, I'd always been one of those people that was the underdog and people didn't expect to be up there. And then you go from that to someone that is just, everyone's like wanting to beat you and targeting you, which is a good thing. And some people run really well with that pressure, but I was kind of, I found it really hard to deal with.
Yeah, interesting you say that, because you probably semi-answered my next question. So just recapping sort of end of 2003 into 2004. So 8th at World Champs in the 10K, 3rd at World Half, 1 World Cross. So, and you know, anybody that knows distance running knows that it's probably harder to win a World Cross Country Championship over 8K than it would be to win an Olympic medal on the track, because you're racing against 6 Africans from each country, often the 5K specialists and the 10K specialists. So you would, like, at the back of your mind, you would have been thinking, well, potentially I should be able to medal at the Athens Games. Was that sort of at the back of your mind?
Yeah, and for sure. And I'd been in Sydney and I kind of had an experience with the Olympics, but going off, like, having run so well at the World Champs the year before, like, I knew that I had the capability, and so I kind of, I was kind of like just thinking of Athens, and I went to a training camp just after I won World Cross in California, and I think I was probably in the best shape of my career 5 weeks after that race, but I got injured, and it wasn't the sort of injury that I was out for like 2 months. I think it was like a tendon problem in one of my shins, and I got running again before Athens, but I was nowhere near as good as I could be. And I think I probably came about 20th or 21st. Like, it was a race where I probably got lapped. I don't know. I can't even really remember the race, but I remember it was one of those really hard, tough experiences. Yeah, just really, like, it was a hard thing to do and hard thing not to pull out. But like, I would never pull out, but it was one of those races where you kind of, that's in your back of your mind. You're like, oh, this is embarrassing. But you shouldn't think like that. But I was still young at the time, and it was really hard race.
So how hard is it going into an Olympics knowing that you're not at the top of your game?
Oh, it's really hard because you kind of like, I really wanted to compete, but every Olympics that you go to, not everyone in the field's 100%, and it's just one of those things where you want to be at your best, but they're only every 4 years, and it's they're hard. It's hard to make an Olympics as it is, let alone to be at your best when the Olympic day happens. And everything firing. You've got to deal with the Olympic Village, different countries, different travel, like different weather, like there's so many variables. And it's sometimes with track and field, that's probably, the Olympics is probably the only thing the Australian public look at, like every 4 years. That's pretty much all the track and field gets coverage wise over here. So it's kind of, you do a lot more interviews, I feel like, before the Olympics, whereas before World Crosses, they're just as big and tougher competition-wise, but the Australian public don't see that. So it's probably a lot less pressure and a lot less, like, different things to kind of deal with.
Yeah.
But Athens was hard. It was tough. But I won the Great North Run probably a few months after that. So I was capable of doing more, but because of that injury, I just hadn't had the preparation that I really should have been able to have. And I mean, in the circumstances, if there was other girls, if there was more girls that had qualified, I would have pulled out, but there was only 2 of us in the 10K, and so I was going to run anyway, but sometimes you just know that it may not be as good as you want it to be.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Which brings me a question to just the circuit in general, because looking up, you mentioned that you've won, the Great South Run in 2004, the Great North Run in 2004. Was it San Silvestre, Valicana? So some of the really big road races in the world. Berlin Half Marathon, Great Yorkshire Run, Great Edinburgh Run. Chiba International Cross Country 3 years. So did you enjoy life on the circuit and living out of a suitcase, or did you actually find it quite draining? And because, like the runners like myself that aren't at your level would think that, oh man, it'd be awesome to be able to run full time and travel the world. But is it as good as what we think it is, or it's quite tough at times?
Oh, look, it's hard at times. I mean, I was very lucky because I bought an apartment in London in 2003, I think. So I could live between that apartment and my house in Melbourne. And I think a lot of athletes, like most athletes on the circuit, they don't really have a base in Europe. So they're kind of always living out of a suitcase. And that's really hard. And I remember I enjoyed it. Like, I liked the travel. I was quite good at traveling and going with the flow, and I didn't have any hookups on like what I have to eat and all that stuff. Like, I was pretty good with a lot of those things, like just things at the last minute going wrong and dealing with stuff. And I think if you just want to be in your little home environment and have all your friends around, your family around, I think it's a really, really hard lifestyle. But if you can kind of be a bit adaptable, and a bit relaxed and that kind of thing, it's good. But by 2008, I found it really hard. So I ended up moving to Boulder and just living in America full time, pretty much, and just not traveling as much. And when I was younger, I found it fine. But when races don't go well or you get injured, like in 2005, I got injured, or I did the World Champs in Helsinki, and then I was injured, and I just came home from Europe way early just because it wasn't kind of working out, and there's no point in being over there if you're not really racing. But when injuries happen kind of at the start of the European summer, that's really hard, because then you're kind of there and you're kind of hoping the injury gets better in a few months, but it may not. So it's hard. Like, I think it's one of those things where I was really lucky because I was getting paid off Nike, and I was kind of running well. But when it's hard, when you're not running well and you're injured, which happens to everyone, people are often quick to criticize what you're doing wrong, or there's a lot of questions that you ask, and I think you get better at dealing with it when you're older. But when you're in your early 20s, I think it's tough, and I think it's tough for everyone that does it these days too, because you're away from your support structure here. So I dealt with it as well as I could, but I definitely did. It's hard, really hard at times, for sure.
Yeah. And so the decision to move to Boulder, so that was to train with Brad Hudson. How did that all come about?
Oh, well, I just my dad died in 2008, and I had a few other things going on, and I just felt like I needed a bit of a change. And even from what I was doing, from living between Melbourne and London, and Nick Bedeau was coaching me, but he actually suggested, it might be good for you to just do something a bit different, because I think with every athlete, sometimes you can't just keep doing the same thing. For some athletes that works really well, but for others, you've got to change it up a bit. So I decided to move to America and just train with a group over there. And I ended up, first of all, just training with Andrew Leatherby a lot and doing Nick's training. And then Brad Hudson moved back to Boulder. I think he'd been living in Eugene in Oregon, and he started a little group. So I ended up training in that group for a while, and that was really good. It really helped. I didn't do a marathon from 2008 to 2012, but so from 2008 Olympics, I ran the marathon at Beijing, and then I didn't do another one until the start of 2012, which was a really good one in Houston. But I think it took me quite a few years just of training, and kind of, I did a lot of races, I guess, but not nowhere near some of them at the level that I used to run at. And I lost the contract I was on with Nike, so I wasn't getting paid that much. And I think I just need to do something different. And so obviously when you're running well, everything's awesome. But if you have a few years of not running well, it's really hard. And you kind of question, am I doing the right thing? Should I be doing something else with my life and all that stuff? But I decided to do that and try something different. And I loved Boulder's awesome. So many awesome people. I had a lot to do with Steve Jones over there too. And Jonesy, former world record holder over the marathon, London Marathon champion. He's won Boston. I mean, he's a guru, but such an awesome guy. And I think it was just great to have a bit to do with people that live in other countries that I'd met kind of on the circuit, but a bit more to do with them in my career as well.
Yeah. So that period between 2004 and 2008, because obviously we had the Com Games in Melbourne during that period. So was that just a period of just on and off sort of injured?
I was competing at the highest level every year, but I got a bit injured in 2005. 2006, I had a good year. That was the year I ran 2:22 in Chicago, broke the national record. But I mean, it's interesting because when I look back at my career, in 2006, I ran 4:07 at Prefontaine over 1500, and then a few months after that, I ran 2:22 for the marathon. So I think I always say this to marathon runners, it's so important that even if you say you're a marathon runner, you need to be good at 5K, 10K. You need to have that speed. For me to run 2:22, I need to be running well over 5K, 10K in the kind of 6 months before. And that range, I think, really helped me kind of be as good as I could be over a lot of different distances. But yeah, it's interesting because I think I was injured on and off, but I would say my best years were probably 2001 to 2006. They were my best years. And I came fourth twice at the World Cross in 2006. I came fourth at Com Games, but I was devastated in the 10K. I felt like I ran really bad, but then a week later, I came fourth twice at World Cross, and they were brilliant runs. So I think, I just didn't run that well. And that happens sometimes. You're not robots, and it's really, it's one of those things where you get really upset, but you kind of have to move on, and you have to kind of look at the next thing, and you can't kind of dwell on, the past. Yeah. But I remember being devastated after Com Games in Melbourne.
So we have a lot of our listeners, I'd say, are probably more the marathon type runners than the track runner. So as you said, you needed to run a good marathon, you felt like you still needed good speed. So how did your training look in the lead up to Chicago? Like, how was it different to what you were doing with Nick? Were you doing marathon specific sessions, and how were you keeping the balance between the speed, the strength, and also the endurance?
Yeah, so it's interesting. And before Chicago, that was '06, and Nick was coaching me then. And the training was a little bit more volume then, so maybe 180K a week. So 5K, 10K training, I was probably doing about 160. I was racing a lot less when I was training for the marathon. And for me, I had to be really careful of running too hard, too close to a marathon. So I made the mistake before my first marathon of running. I ran a really good, so I won the Great North Run. I ran awesome. I ran 67.50 something for the Great North Run. 3 weeks later, by the time I got to New York Marathon, I was I felt a bit tired and a bit I'd kind of left like my training and my racing, like I was probably peaking or a bit better a bit before the marathon. Then by the time I got to the marathon, I was tired and just a bit, just kind of over it. So that prep for Chicago, I was probably a lot fresher. I probably did a little bit less volume, but I ran the Great North Run as a lead-up race over half marathon, but I didn't run it quite as hard. Like I ran 70 minutes or something. I came second, but running 70 for a half is a lot different to running 67 something as far as how hard you go. And I did I used to do 1K reps like 8 times a K, but we do like 40-minute tempo runs where you're kind of getting up to marathon pace and a bit faster at the end. Not anything like my longest run before Chicago when I ran 2:22 was 2 hours 20. So I wasn't doing any crazy long runs, and that was easy too. But I was just doing, track session or like some kind of short interval session on Tuesday, tempo Thursday, a bit longer run on Wednesday. Maybe Saturday might have been like a longer warm up and some 1 minute hills, and Sunday a long run that was a bit longer than 2 hours, but not more than about 2:20.
So a bit more like the Deke and Mona style sort of marathon training. Like you weren't out there doing sort of 10K at marathon pace at the end of your long run and that sort of thing.
No, yeah. And I wasn't doing like 2 runs on a Sunday or anything like that. Like it was, just sensible training. I think I almost won the New York half marathon. That was not that long before Chicago as well. So I'd run 2 half marathons within the last probably 8 to 10 weeks before Chicago. So I think training a bit more on the road helped me with Chicago, and I think that's the mistake I made before my first marathon. I didn't run enough on the road, and my body wasn't really conditioned to that pounding. Even though the pace was slow for me in New York, I just couldn't keep it going. But you've got to be running well. Like once you get to 30K, that's when you've got to kind of, you've got to be running on. You can't be kind of slowing down and losing time. And if your body's breaking down because you've run mostly on trails and the grass and the track and not enough on roads, or not enough kind of half marathons in the prep and stuff like that, then I think that's a real problem for the marathon. And if marathons are cold, like nutrition, you just got to drink a bit. Like I didn't have to take in too much nutrition wise. I was pretty efficient at burning fat, but I think it's that body breakdown of not having done the proper tempo runs kind of at marathon pace or a bit faster when your legs are a bit tired, or doing some half marathons or some road work, like some running on the road leading up to the marathon. Like they're so important. It's so important to be able to kind of get to the race knowing that what you can do and the training that you've done, and that gives you confidence as well. So I did like my second marathon. So my first marathon was 2:42. 2:38. My second marathon in London was 2:26. So I'd improved 14 minutes from my first to my second. So having that big improvement, I knew I could improve again. And Chicago was my third marathon. So I think it's that experience too in the marathon helps a lot.
Yeah. And how was the training approach different when you went to Brad? Because I know that his training is very different to what Nick's marathon training program would look like.
Yeah, so he's quite different. And also because I was living at altitude, I was doing 1 less session a week. So Brad stuff, like you might do like 5 or 6 times a mile as a session on Wednesday, and then a specific long run on Saturday, which might be kind of a lot harder running towards the end, but I think something like 4 times 2 miles, and then kind of getting into marathon pace and then faster at the end with like half a mile float. Or he's got a lot of his sessions kind of that he writes out, but there's so many that we used to do, but on the road as well. So I think the main difference was that there was one less session, but the long run was harder and probably longer than the long run I did when I was training with Nick. But it's a really hard thing to compare because like I felt the best I ever felt in a marathon was when I ran Houston Marathon in 2012. But I ran 2:28, so it's very different to running 2:22. But I just felt so good the whole way. And but I think that kind of training on the road, but like Brad does a lot of stuff at marathon pace, and then running a bit faster than marathon pace on tired legs at the end. And I think that's kind of one of those things that I got used to doing. I got really comfortable with the pace, but being able to run a bit faster as well. And I think, and running a lot on roads and bike paths and stuff as well.
Yeah.
So it's hard to compare, but I think, like with the stuff that Brad does for the marathon, I think it really, it was really good. But it was just good to do something a bit different too than what I'd done before. So I think both training works, but it's just kind of figuring out what the best. And for me, I think it was good to just try something a bit different too. It was exciting to try some training that I'd never done before as well.
Yeah. And but you decided to retire, was it pretty much after 2012 Olympics?
Yeah, so pretty much like I was injured before that Olympics and I just wanted to run because I knew I probably wouldn't go to another one. And I didn't actually even expect to qualify for it. When I ran so well in Houston, I was pumped. But I got an injury in my hip and I was still running on the Ultra G machine, like even the week of the race. And anyone that runs a marathon, like I'd never advise someone to run a marathon if you've only really been running on an Ultra G machine for a few months in the lead up, because marathon's a long way to run. But yeah, and I was in pain after about 5K, and I think I went on the footage, I looked like I was limping a bit. And so I mean, there's no way I wasn't going to finish it, but it was probably one of those races that you felt just pain every step. And then at the end I was in a wheelchair, and I think they took me back to the village in a wheelchair, and I was in the wheelchair for the next day after, and it was a bit humiliating, but like in the same sense, like it was just one of those things where I'm probably in the back of my mind I'm thinking I don't really want to do this anymore. Even though I didn't say it to people, and I still kept training after that once I could run again, and competed a bit at the start of 2013, but my heart wasn't in it. So then I kind of just like, I was still living in America, and I was like, well, I'm going to start a business and, and work a bit more and just not do the running as much. So it's hard. It's a hard thing to stop competing and retire, like, in a formal sense, because you kind of like, I'm still young enough to be competing now, but it's in your mind, if you don't really want to do it, you won't do the training properly, and you just waste people's time helping you too. So that's why I really kind of decided to just take a break and not continue. And then, I never really had the urge to ever compete again.
And how was it in terms of, because I know a lot of elite athletes, because they've been doing it for so long and it almost sort of defines them, did you have any issues with, what am I going to do now? People just know me as, the Australian marathon record holder or the woman that won World Cross. Did you have some identity sort of issues when you first decided to retire?
Yeah, it was really hard. Like, I think when I was living in America, it was a lot easier because a lot of my friends weren't runners. And so they kind of, they're just going on with their life, and they ask you how the running's going, but you kind of like, oh, I'm not really doing it anymore. And then you just talk about something else. So it's not like, it was probably harder for me though. I started a really good coaching business in America, and then I decided to move home just because my sister had her first baby in 2013. And once Matilda was born, once Caitlin had her baby, it was really hard to not live in Australia. So then, so just before Matilda turned 1, so that would have been 2014, I moved back to Australia, and that's when I found it really hard, because I thought, like, I had 3 degrees at uni, and I've, been an elite athlete, and like successful at everything I ever did. And I moved back to Australia, and I was like, and I saw some jobs for stuff I wanted to do that I was qualified as far as degrees go to do. And I was like, yeah, I'll just do these interviews and I'll just work here. And I remember going to 2 interviews, one for QAS and one for Australian swimming, in various jobs that I could do. And I got to the final 3 people, and they're kind of both times they're like, oh, you don't have enough experience in this job. That's why we gave it to someone else. And that's when I was like, that's when I really kind of struggled, because I'm like, well, like, how am I supposed to get experience? I've been an athlete for 15 years. Like, so, and I think that was really hard for me. I think I just thought it would be easy, and it wasn't. It definitely wasn't. So I feel for people that even have worse experiences than what I had, because it's really hard. And even though I had 3 degrees, so it's not like I did nothing when I was competing either, but it's still a really hard thing to kind of figure out. And and it just took me 6 months or so. And actually Ryan McDonald from the Gold Coast Marathon, he met me at Houston Marathon in 2008 when I was there, and he met me in Brisbane one day, and he's like, oh, do you remember me? I met you in Houston. And I'm like thinking, not really, but yeah, I'll catch up with you. And then he's like, oh, we'd love you to be an ambassador for the Gold Coast Marathon. And I was like, oh, yeah, I'd love to do it. And at this stage, I was still kind of trying to figure out my life and hadn't got a proper job. I was still running a coaching business from America, but I hadn't really got a proper job. And then, after I did that as an ambassador for Gold Coast Marathon, then I met Dave Ginther, who I knew from Athletics Australia, but he was the CEO of Queensland Athletics, and he offered me a job to be in charge of like Q Run and kind of manage their recreational arm of Queensland Athletics. And so I think from that Gold Coast Marathon experience and meeting Ryan and kind of getting back involved with the running community, I think that was something that really helped me a lot. That probably, looking back on it now, it was something that helped me in my life so much that I probably was really struggling, but I didn't really say anything to anyone. And then, I think it was a hard time, but I think getting back, because I most of my career, I raced every single one of my national records and best times, best performances are all in Europe or America. So I never raced. I'd never done a marathon in Australia. I never raced here, so I didn't know the running community here, especially in Brisbane and Gold Coast and stuff. So yeah, that was really hard, but it was awesome once I started meeting people and kind of got my life kind of sorted out a bit and figured out what I wanted to do. Yeah,
it's a good point about how difficult it is to I guess, get into a job if you've just been competing, because so many top athletes in other fields just sort of jump from their sporting career into another job based on their profile or their name, which sort of brings me to the fact that I mentioned before, for the runner, like, we know it's probably harder to win a world cross country championship than it is an Olympic gold medal. But you're not like really a household, or you've never really been a household sort of name in Australia in the sporting landscape. Why do you think that is? And does it sort of, did it annoy you at any point?
Yeah, that's a good point, because I was definitely a lot more well known in the UK for what I'd done in running than here, and I found it a lot easier to get jobs in the UK and America than here. And I think, it doesn't. I've come to accept it, because the Australian public, they love an Olympics, but they don't follow much else with running. They do follow a bit more now, because Gold Coast Marathon have their streaming, and there's a lot more streaming of bigger races, and there's more money. Like I know that Gold Coast Marathon have an IAAF gold label, so they get like the best athletes in the world competing here, and and as we all know, Jess ran so well there last year. But I feel like it's a frustrating thing, but at the same time, like, my running's never defined me, and I'm uncomfortable with kind of telling people about it as well, like, because I always think that there's so many people out there that are awesome at their jobs, but it's not a media thing. Like, we wouldn't know who the best accountant in Australia is, or we wouldn't know who the best, landscaper in Australia is, or stuff like that, because it's not a career that we're looking at the media going, oh, who are these people? And so that's why I think with running, like, it's something that I was really good at, but there's so many people that are awesome at what they do that, doesn't frustrate me. But I think a lot of people probably don't realize the magnitude of what I did in athletics unless they're really into the sport, and that's very few people. But I'm happy to help out juniors and help out where I can, and that's as much as I need as far as recognition and that kind of stuff goes.
So, with Australians being so obsessed with Olympic champions, was there ever any moments when you're in Olympic Games, and we know how successful the hockey roos are, did it ever sort of cross your mind at Olympic Games that, I could actually be an Olympic medalist if I stuck with hockey?
Yeah, well, that's interesting because I remember marching out into the closing ceremony of the Sydney Olympics, and I was actually in the squad for the Australian team for the Sydney Olympics before I kind of just quit hockey altogether. One of the girls, I knew a lot of girls in that team that won the gold medal, and one of them said to me, I think she was probably a bit drunk, but she was like, "Benita, wouldn't you rather win the gold medal, than compete in running?" And I was like, I had to think about it, and then I was like, well, no, because I just enjoyed the running so much more. So if I had my time again, I still would have chose to be in the 5K at Sydney Olympics and not get the gold medal with the hockey roos. But I mean, it's both sports are so different, and their profile and what they've done is fantastic. But I just still loved the individual sport and improving, and what you put into it is what you get out of it. And that's what frustrated me a lot about the team sports. In the end, it was just you're so reliant on everyone else.
Yeah.
But whereas running, you can't fluke good fitness, and you can also, the improvement is fantastic. So I think, I still remember that.
Yeah. So let's talk about, so what have you been up to now? I know you're obviously an ambassador for Gold Coast Marathon. You're still working for Queensland Athletics?
Yeah. So I'm still working for Queensland Athletics in their rec running program called Q Run. So we've got the biggest membership base in Australia now, and a lot of it's to do with our rec runners and people that just join running groups for social reasons and just to meet other people. And we've affiliated so many community-based groups, a lot of women. It's just booming here. So I look after those groups, lots of events that are affiliated with us, and trail running scene is just taking off as well. So do a lot with that. But I do that. I've just been appointed onto the board of Events Management Queensland, which is really awesome. And I've never been on a board before, so it'll be really exciting. And I think I really want to make a difference, because that's kind of that they look after Gold Coast Marathon and Pen Pac Masters, which is every second year, and massive events. But fantastic to be able to kind of to help out as much as I can with that. And and I'm also starting a business. I live in Palm Beach on the Gold Coast now, where it'll be coaching online and also in person, Palm Beach Run and Tri Club. So we're starting that up with my partner, Anthony. And we're kind of looking at coaching, obviously, runners, but focusing too on the run leg for triathletes, and then getting into triathlon coaching in a few years as well. So a lot of things going on. Cool.
And so what's your role? So as an ambassador of Gold Coast Marathon, what does that sort of look like on the ground? So what do you actually have to do for that?
Yeah, so a lot of it is kind of around the Gold Coast Marathon weekend. So going to functions, kind of meeting people that have done, 10, 15, 20 years of being in the 10K, the half, the marathon. So they have a lot of kind of awards that they give out, and people can kind of go to an area to meet us and talk a bit about their running. But also in the lead up, we're running like a schools competition where schools can enter in the kids races, and I can come out to the school and do a training session with the best school. So we've got that. I'm like doing that kind of thing. But even just random things that come up, they're like with training groups. I've got some new training groups going on as well. So it's kind of, and then that's running out of Australia Fair. So lots of things going on around this area leading up, but a lot of it's around the day. I do some of the live stream on the marathon day, and talk to like a lot of the kind of people that are coming over to Gold Coast for the first time from different countries. And I'm really interested in kind of asking people about their lives and about their running experiences, and how they got into running, and and really helping in that sense. So that kind of part of the Gold Coast Marathon I love, because there's so many stories of like personal achievement that come out, and their media department do such a good job with doing that, and just looking at like when they get their entries, I think people can write kind of what experiences they've had, or and then they might follow up on stories, and that's really exciting. And one thing that I love a lot about the event too.
Yeah, and probably just that's what's cool about the sport is it doesn't matter if you're an Australian record holder or if you want to break 4 hours for the marathon. Like the sense of achievement that you get for me breaking your PBs or goals is the same feeling regardless of what pace you're running at.
Yeah, exactly. And I just have had so much admiration. Now I've coached for a long time. Like I've been coaching for 10 years now. And it's kind of like people that have full-time jobs, they have families, you know, and they're training to run their best ever marathon. And people like that, they just inspire me so much because it's kind of like, it's kind of like, you know, they've got to fit everything in their daily life. And I think that's something that when you're an elite athlete. Sorry,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
It's normally my dog that's barking every week on the podcast, so the listeners will be pretty stoked to know that it's not Russell the pug this week.
Yeah, it's Hunter the Smoodle. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I'll let you go shortly. I've just got a couple more questions. So I know you've got so much going on already, but then in 2017 you were elected to the IAAF Athletes Commission. So what does that involve?
Well, it's just really, so I got elected at the London World Champs by athletes from all different countries, and I had to nominate for that. And it's really just involves, it just kind of depends what issues, like when issues come up, like we've had a couple of meetings around the IAAF Athlete Awards ceremonies in Monaco. I've had a couple of meetings there. I went to Birmingham last year for a meeting at the same time as the World Indoors. But it's really around like issues that athletes raise through their national federations and stuff. And then kind of we have meetings like Inaki Gomez is our chair. And we have kind of meetings about various things like the IAAF world ranking system that's just been put out. Like that's been a big talking point, and we've had a lot of things to kind of chat about there with, you know, some particular countries not being happy and then other countries like really welcoming it. And there's so many just different things. So it's not a lot of work, but sometimes things come up that we kind of have to have a meeting about, like via the phone or things like that. So it's quite a good thing for the sport because it's a separate to IAAF. So Seb Coe's not actually in the meetings, but it's kind of where athletes can have a voice if things aren't kind of going the way that they want, or they've got issues that they want to raise outside the normal channels too.
And how many athletes are involved with that?
I think it's about 12.
Okay.
So just from lots of different events, lots of different disciplines as well. And some athletes are competing, and then there's quite a few on there that are retired as well. Yeah. So it is a hard thing because with the athletes that are competing, like obviously when you're competing, that's your priority. And so I feel like someone like me has a lot more time to do what I'm doing on it. But it's a good mix of people. And Valerie Adams is our vice chair,
cool.
And she's fantastic too. And she's been on it for a long time too.
Yeah. And I might just get your thoughts then. So on firstly, the ranking system, are you for it, or would you prefer just people run times and get picked on that? So that's first question. And secondly, the news that the IAAF are going to basically not have events longer than, I think it's 1,500 or 3K at Diamond Leagues. So maybe what are your thoughts on those two issues?
Well, I mean, I think with the IAAF World Rankings, initially I thought it was something that was really hard for us because, you know, we're so isolated from the rest of the world, and there'd be more competitions for, say, Europeans to compete at to get the world ranking scores. But the more you look into it, and there's very good points around, if you even look at something like Gold Coast Marathon, which is the Oceania Marathon Champs, anyone that runs there, you get points for your time, but also points for the Oceania Marathon Championship. So you could actually get more points for running there than if you ran, say, in another marathon in Australia and ran a bit faster, but it's not it doesn't have as many points to gain from it being the Oceania Champs. So I think it encourages athletes from their countries to run in their countries a bit more. And I think that's a really good thing because when I look back at my career, like I never raced in Australia, and not in marathons or bigger races. And I think it's really important. Like kind of rewinding the clock, I wish I had of probably, but I didn't have those opportunities. So it's giving Australian athletes more opportunities to run in Australia, and Whereas some of these athletes, they may not qualify for the Olympics on times, but they might get the points because they've run in these championship races and these high-scoring races that we have in Australia. Another one is Oceania Champs in Townsville too. That'll be another big one. So it's important to look at those ones in the sense of getting points. And they're for the borderline people, like for some of the other athletes that are well under the qualifying times, that doesn't matter. But it's more the borderline people. Yeah.
But then because I was looking at the ranking systems last year when I thought that they were going to apply them for world champs this year, and winning Oceania Champs was going to give you more bonus points than winning a gold medal at Commonwealth Games, which we know that the quality generally of an Oceania Championships in the marathon is a lot less than a Commonwealth Games gold medal. So, do you see issues with that system not being completely fair?
I think people aren't onto it as much as they should be, because I think in time they should. I know Commonwealth Games is a big deal, and technically there's probably more countries in that competing at a higher level. But I think in time more people will look at this Oceania. Like I know there's a few guys from New Zealand thinking of they're based in London, but thinking of running an Oceania Championships as opposed to London Marathon or something like that. I'm not sure if it's London Marathon, but, so I think it still encourages more people to compete. But I think maybe a lot of top athletes aren't kind of probably taking it up as much as they should. And probably, that's a hard one because I know, people would much, if you get to, but then Commonwealth Games, there's so many good marathon runners here that don't even qualify to run in Com Games, but they could be good enough for Tokyo. And how do they qualify this year? Or so. But I know what you're saying, and I think there's still a few problems with it. That it's a hard. It's not something that is a completely and that's why I think they've made it hard. Well, a bit on times and a bit through these points. So it'll be interesting to see how it's rolled. I think there's problems in America around their marathon qualifying race that's before Tokyo, because if they have someone that wins there that doesn't have enough points, and then it's going to be in Atlanta, so it's going to be a hot race. The times will be slow. That could be interesting.
Yeah, well, the US system, their whole system's been based on just having trials, which the trials could mean absolutely nothing based on this new system. So,
and I hate that because I love the trials. I love the pressure. So I agree. So that's something I'm going to have to look at.
And thoughts on no 5Ks at Golden League, Diamond League?
Yeah, that's a really hard one because it's kind of like it's annoying because really then it's only middle distance runners, sprinters, jumpers and throwers. Really, there's no distance, and because 1500 these days, like you've got to be world class 800 runner really to be a good 1500 runner. So it just I ran my 5K national record at Berlin Golden League then. So I ran my national record at one of those meets. So it's kind of like, I don't know, it's like if you're a distance runner, they kind of, if the message it sends to me is that distance running is too boring for Diamond League, so we'll just get you running somewhere else, which, you can't do that. So I don't know, it's frustrating, and I kind of think it's just cutting out so many good athletes that people love to watch.
Yeah. I think it's
and not even have,
it's like a sign of the times where like every sport seems to get shortened, like cricket gets shortened to 2020 and tennis gets shortened to fast 4 or whatever it is. So, and I've got 2 questions that have come in from listeners. So the first one is, from your perspective, what do you think can be done to help promising junior girls become resilient female open athletes?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good one because I think resilience is huge. I honestly think there should be more funding in that age group between kind of 18 and 21, whether it's you go away, like going on camps where I can be involved to kind of talk a bit about my career and a bit about the things that I found really hard too, because I think there's a lot of junior girls out there that, you can do the training when you're a kid and everything's easy and like it's fine when you're in your home environment and kind of around people that you know every day, but it's that resilience of going away where you don't know anyone. I think it's a cool thing to kind of be outside your comfort zone, but kind of be introduced to that slowly, not just kind of dumped in a a training camp when you're a bit older. So I think I would love to have a bit more to do with juniors, whether it even be like some of the best juniors for the first year of uni or whatever they're doing after year 12, living in a group house in Melbourne or somewhere where it's good for training, not necessarily Melbourne, could be Ballarat, and kind of living together, training together. I think that's the kind of what I had at the AIS.
Yeah.
It was kind of a gradual introduction to what to do when you're better. And I just think stuff like that. I know there was a really good program in the UK that Mo Farah was a part of when he was out of juniors. And I think having everyone together, so you're not in it by yourself, but you're still outside your comfort zone because you're not living in your hometown. But I feel like there's so many juniors going to America, and I think that's a good option. But there's so many good options here if we had the right funding models in place, and I don't think that we have the right ones in place at the moment.
That's a great answer, and you'd fit that role perfectly, I reckon. For sure. And last question is, in your opinion, what's the best advice you've been given or have given when it comes to success in distance running?
I think patience is a huge one because when you're young, like even if you're in your early 20s, and you're kind of about to make a big breakthrough, but you haven't quite made it, things can be really frustrating. And I think the best advice I've always been given is that, you've got to keep doing all the 1%ers and doing everything as well as you can, because those breakthroughs can come at any time. And every time you get to that start line and you're not injured, you're not sick, you've got to be putting everything on the line. You can't be using excuses because it could be that race that you're going to run your PB and you're going to run that breakthrough, but you got to put yourself out there and keep trying. And I think that's probably the biggest bit of advice I got.
And were you big on the 1%ers, like particularly when you're injured? So were you a big cross trainer?
Oh, not necessarily. Like I'd probably cross train an hour a day when I was injured, but I think it's really important not to, if you're cross training a lot when you're injured, not to be hurting in that area, because I know a lot of people that cross train when they're injured, they do too much and they actually make the injury worse, even though they're not running, they're doing too much cross training. It's important to keep fit, but then when you return to running, it has to be fairly gradual, but you'll get your fitness back quickly. But I was big on the 1%ers, like doing a bit of core every day, getting enough rest, getting enough massage. I didn't stretch that much, but just doing all the right things, not going out. Like you can't be going out late at night and kind of just not doing all the things that what you should be doing as an elite athlete. And I think that kind of consistency of doing everything day in, day out is so important as a distance runner. And and it stops you getting sick. Like a lot of distance runners are always sick, and if you're sick, you're not training consistently as well. So you've just got to really look after your lifestyle and make sure you're getting enough rest and relaxing a lot. Relaxing is a big thing, I think, and rest, and that they're probably the two things that distance runners can't do. So that's probably my biggest advice, is make sure that every day you're not fully focused on training or doing other things. Like you got to rest. Even if you think it's not productive, it's so important.
Yeah, well said. And I think that's a good place to wrap it up. You've been super generous with your time. Cannot thank you enough.
Brad. No, yeah.
But no,
thanks, Brad. Yeah.
Thank you. And look, you've had an awesome career, and good luck with the coaching business.
Thanks, Brad. Yeah, no, it's been great to come on here, and you guys have done so many great interviews with awesome people. So it's an honour to be asked to do it as well.
No worries. Take care.
Thanks.
See you,
See ya.
Bye.